Remember?
Yeah.
I threw my bag out.
How are you, Father Chris?
Good. How are you all?
Good. I heard the baby finally came to church.
Yes, she was great.
Yeah, thank God.
She's a cutie pie.
She was singing with the chanting. She loves it I put it on the phone and she loves it.
Sorry. Just making sure the technology works. Okay. You're saying, I'm sorry.
It's okay, don't worry.
So you're saying what else? No, because I was just fixing the tech. Go ahead.
That's all.
She was great. She's a cutie pie. We had our mommy and me.
I heard they loved it.
We had a good group, and so we're going to continue that and see that blossom as well too. And
Good.
yeah, we're very blessed. The underlying issues with your church is that everything is very we're like the Wizard of Oz.
Oh,
Everything looks great on the outside, and the inside is behind a curtain and is being pulled by a couple strings. And that's
oh
not good.
yes, but you know,
But that's not good.
it's not good, but unfortunately, I think that's how it always is.
Can't
Was.
continue
Oh.
that way. That's the
Well,
problem.
that has to come from.
That's the problem. Is it's we are, that's why we'll talk about stewardship. We'll say some stuff here and there, some details, but it's funny in some reflection from last year with the 50th and the beauty of that. And we will communicate, and you're going to see October, November, December is going to be pretty dedicated. It's not about rhetoric of you have to give. What it has to do is nothing last year made us go into some super echelon like we are.
What's going to happen next?
I don't know what people think an all-star church is, or what the best church is, but all last year did is it actually brought us closer, not even at a level playing field. That's bad. What that means for our church for quite a while, from my time, from Father Peter, for our community, we were getting by. Getting by.
Right.
Whether people wanted to define it as just because of the mortgage, just because of maintenance, deferring of maintenance, stuff like that, we were simply getting by.
Yeah, living paycheck to paycheck.
And it has come to a head because the reality, the heaviness, and I can say this to this body, is that your children and grandchildren's generation do not, I can say that with validity, I'm not judging any of yours because I'm part of that generation, do not give. They are not givers. It's not in them. They have to be taught. They have to be educated. They are very much modern business where they have to see it as an investment. But when you're invested, you're engaged. So you see, like modern day, like on their phones, they have these apps like Robinhood, all these things that they can, buy stock and get rid of stock, and they're part of it, right? They're engaged. But if they're not engaged, so that means they're also not the ones who are also giving to St. Jude's, to these other places as well too. It is still their parents and grandparents' generation who are the ones giving. And I think, and I do believe this, I used to hear it. There was a bad connotation that, the children of the stewards of the families really don't need to give. I use it as a big word, give, until they're getting engaged, getting married.
Yeah.
And that's a false statement, because we're assuming from 18 to, it used to be maybe mid-20s, used to. Now mid-20s have turned to mid-30s. And that's a big gap. And then I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not stupid. I'm also part of it too. They're working. They have jobs. They're doing okay. I mean, most people who are starting a job now with some type of college degree or postgraduate degree or anything else, yeah, they might have debt, are still doing pretty well. So if we're not teaching or conversing about, hey, you and what you have, it should not just be about amassing it or then to splurge or just purchase and stuff like that, but to honestly give. And giving is a great term because you can give in so many ways. That's why when you define stewardship, time, talents, and treasures, I don't care about somebody just give me a check, but are they giving their time? Can they give their talents? I mean, if you have a CPA who can volunteer and actually take care of our books, wow, I've just saved a few $1,000s that maybe an account would have to do for our church, that now someone has taken the time to do through their talent to support their church. But There's also a failure on us that we don't educate. And now we're going to go in forward as well too, is to tell people, um, here are deficiencies. Where can you help? And the reality is we're going to have to turn into the old JFK attitude. Not what can your country do for you, but what can you do for your country? That's the church.
Right.
It has to be taught and has to be ingrained into them, because they have to understand. Because why? With love to all of you, your generation, your parents' generation have fought the good fight, have done the journey. They're now at the forefront. And so really my struggle is, and I've talked with this with other Christians as well too, is the ones who are actually using the church currently are your children and grandchildren. You don't do youth ministries. You've already done that in the past, right? 30, 40, 50 years ago. All that stuff, Goya, Sunday school. Okay, great. Now done. They now have to then see, oh wow, I'm participating in this. They all like, right? Everyone feels good. Everyone likes what's going on at the church. Oh, this is great. I love seeing all the kids. I love seeing all the pictures. Yeah, great. Okay, how will that continue? And you don't want to just do something to maintain it. How then can I give to grow it? And that is the question that we have to be able to converse clearly to the community, and then B, they have to start thinking about individually. So it's like we have to continue to do a two-form conversation, but it's a reality. We are not in any special place. And it's funny because you'll see it when we have like our general assemblies. We're going to do a Zoom town hall just so people can understand what's going on with their church and its state. But we have 3-4 months of operating, for our church. Okay, that's piggybacked off the success of 2-3 years post COVID, where I tell everyone, I said, that was when we had the surpluses. We all knew we had surpluses, but that only happened because you had Rockstar Greek Fest, which then gave us more money than you expected. B, stewardship was solid but not increasing correctly. And then C, 2-3 people are pulling strings for the entire church, a single clergyman, a few office staff, whatever, to compensate for real areas of where people need to actually work. So I don't think it's appropriate either. So when we see this stuff and people are like, oh, everything's great. No, it's kind of like it was a nice lightning in the bottle, but you can't do that every year or plan on it. And so unfortunately the realities are coming to the head. We're like, okay, for us to do what we're doing, we're going to have to increase but you see, I can't even communicate to say we have to cut. If you cut, then you stop the success. There's nothing to cut. I mean, when you cut, you're like, what do you want me to cut?
Yeah, you're down to the bare bones.
What do you want to do? You want to cut the second priest that everyone wanted a second priest that now we can't really afford? You want me to cut ministries when I'm a church about ministries? Like, what do you want me to do? Because if not, and it's two-handed. Things have increased, right? Okay, we get it. That's life. But if everyone likes what's going on, these are real heavy conversations. I'm like, I think it's up to the people to determine out. So when then you got people talking about like an expansion. Oh no, I'm putting a big caution sign. No stop, but caution. That means we're not going to move forward until we figure out. Because if I can't maintain what we have now, and I want to expand, and how am I going to maintain that if I can't maintain what we have? I think these are heavy conversations that people just need to prayerfully think about. So when they give, okay, if that means they give an additional couple hundred, a little bit more, or they say, I'll give this, and then I'm going to plan on giving my time and talents specifically so they can do more. Okay, bravo, we can do stuff. But until then, we really can't do a lot. And unfortunately, the Metropolis has the same issues like that too. But I tie in the Metropolis because when you're going to read about chapter 3, it talks about the bishop and the role of the bishop. I think it's very powerful for what we're studying and understanding, because the role of the bishop, the episkopos, right, is very powerful. And I think that's important for us to know as a body, is that the titles of the bishops really didn't come until a later time with the ecumenical councils. So think of our own bishops. We have Ignatios. Ignatios actually has probably one of the most confusing titles. He's either, I've heard, Metropolitan of Pendopolis or Bishop of Pendopolis. And then you have to then look under historical significance. Same thing with us. Actually, look at the Antiochians. The Antiochians currently in the United States, they have a metropolitan. But a metropolitan is also an archbishop. Did you hear that? We have metropolitans who are archbishops. So when you say metropoliti, in their title though, when we say for our father and our archbishop and father Nathaniel, technically it's not metropolitan. You don't say our metropolitan and father Nathaniel. Metropolitan means of a metropoli. Metropoli is an enhancement of a diocese, right? Episcopi. Okay, but unfortunately, when we have these titles, it brings these confusions, and you see this also with the Catholic Church. They have bishops, they have archbishops, they have cardinals, they have everyone that is titled in their way. But then there's even more appendages into those things. So there's a significance to how they're titled. When we're looking now to Ignatius and being an episkopos, it is in the purest form, because as we know, there were also the first episcopi as well too, bishops at that time, and Ignatius being that took on that great role. And when you guys were reading and studying with Father Patrick, the one thing that I always acknowledge, especially about Ignatius, is always compared him to James, the brother of Christ, being the first bishop, episcopos of Jerusalem, and other ones who took on this title of episcopi. And it's interesting. There are icons. I don't have the time to look for them and show them to you, but there are icons of the 12 apostles as episcopi, because they technically, you can, and these are all technicalities, can be defined as the first bishops. Because why? They took on the mantle that Christ gave to them in the Great Commission to go out into the world, and then also to then hear the scripture from John, where he then tells them that he is the good shepherd, right? And that his sheep know his voice and they follow him. And he's also the gate being the doorway, the openness into pasture, or obviously to be let out. And that's what we see when we're going to talk about Ignatius now too, because when we study about the episcopi, we see that that's what they are. That's why they all have staffs, those big staffs that they hold. Each staff is different. Hierarchs and jurisdictions have different staffs. Cyprus has the staff of the earth, and on the earth is a cross, and it signifies the awness of being a, I forgot how they called Cyprus as the archbishop. It's a really cool title because it's different than the Pope of Alexandria. So Alexandria, the Patriarch of Alexandria, is called Pope and Patriarch, right? Patriarchy. And being that he is that shepherd, his staff is different because he also, even his vestments are different. A typical episcopal just an investment than a clergyman, right? Because it's a hierarchical ascension, a higher up level. But they would wear the omophorion, which I think Father Patrick might have brought up in the past as well too. The omophorion is that additional veil that they wear that kind of goes around their neck, and that actually does have a Judaic manner as well too, because you'll look at rabbis and high leaders that wear an extra shawl around their neck, symbolizing their authority, symbolizing that they are good shepherds. And they are the shepherds of the flock. The flock are now individuals of the episcopal. And then the diaconi, the deacons, are the servants. The diaconi is such a bad add to like a deacon, a vulo, a servant, almost like a slave. Like, no. Yeah, go for
National theme has been more his teachings on the episcopacy. Look at the epistles. Because of his antiquity and closeness to the apostles, Ignatius' legacy is one of one that all first leader, as well as being a disciple of one of the inner circle of Jesus, along with Peter and James. This makes him an authoritative witness to what the apostles taught and how the church functions. Roman Catholics love and venerate Ignatius and include him on their calendar of saints, yet he may be challenging for them, as there is nothing in the writings of this early saint to support the claims to the supremacy for the Pope of Rome. Ignatius offers nothing for that ecclesiology, even when writing to the church in Rome. Ignatius is perhaps more striking and more challenging for Protestants, most of whom do not have bishops, or if they do, they are primarily administrative officers and not seen as successors to the apostles. Ignatius, who stands in the shadow of the apostles themselves, presents such a robust and forceful image of the episcopacy. I'm going to get that wrong.
Don't worry about it.
That he challenges
These
those,
aren't the easiest words.
that he challenges those who regard bishops as some latest evil creation. Indeed, so striking is his language that the 19th century saw various Protestant scholars attempting to disprove the authenticity of any text bearing Ignatius's name. Ironically, it was through this scholarly work that their genuine character was finally established. For the Orthodox tradition, Ignatius presents neither a challenge nor a problem, because his teaching on the episcopacy is essentially what we will teach and practice. That does not mean that we do not sometimes fail to live up to our own teachings. In his writings, we see the bishop as he ought to be for us, and even now. He is still the leader of the worship, the focus of unity, an integral part of the local church body, the one to whom obedience is due, the outcome of God himself. Perhaps the only significant difference is that the bishop is no longer the local pastor for the congregation as it was for Ignatius.
Okay, on that reading and the meditation and prayerfulness on it, what do you interpret about the episcopacy and the hierarchy? Yourselves as Christians, what have been your notions of bishops?
Well, that they should actually be the successors to the apostles, because our church, the true church, is all transcended from the apostles. So we have to have successors, and so they lay hands on each bishop. So we can trace every bishop back to Christ.
True.
So we should look at them as a line of succession that's not been broken.
Excellent. And that usually brings a lot of the validity to the Orthodox Christian faith, even with the schismatic Orthodox, such as the genuine Orthodox Church, where the old calendar is. That's actually the biggest division, because they cannot claim that anymore, because then all their laying on hands comes from a schismatic, whether they were heretical or they're heretical, it goes into those attitudes. But as bishops in general, any of your interactions or general, and we don't need to name names, thinking about, His Eminence Nathaniel or Ignatios, bless Mary, whatever you want. What are your own understandings of bishops? Because there is a connotation in modern day, and I think that's just society, where they diminish the role of the bishops. But then secondly, they also mock it, because then they interpret the role of the bishops that could be unfortunately interpreted in a poor way of vainglory. Even look at, in other words, the Greek term like megalia, what they wear, how they look, how they're presented. I always see people, they're always mock them if they're driving or they're driven like in a Mercedes or something like that, right? Who are they? Is that representative of them being a shepherd of the flock? How do you interpret it? How do you see it, being yourself as Christians and Christians who have seen bishops in many ways and many forms?
I'm trying to catch up and understand because of my background.
Mm-hmm.
And in reading Ignatius, it seems to me that it was a much more intimate relationship with the parishioners, because it was so much smaller. I mean, he was the priest as well as the bishop. There was a close relationship between him and his parishioners. He knew them closely. They know him closely. He wasn't in an office downtown, and when he did come to visit, it was an event. And yet he describes the bishop as being standing in the place of God. And now I try to fast forward to today with that same mindset, and I have difficulty.
I think valid points. And I think look at the episcopacy, modern bishops that people have looked up to, some names I could think of were like Christodoulos, who was Archbishop of Greece, especially in the 90s and early 2000s. And he died of, what did he have, pancreatic cancer? He had cancer, he had something, but he died. And because they used to consider him, and again, it goes always back to the attitude, a bishop of the people. Because he was the one who, like in his sermons, would say, inviting all the young adults and children, come as you are, come to Christ. You know, if you're coming with jeans, you have an earring or whatever. He's like, come, just come, be in the church and this and that. And it was becoming very humanistic, and it's hard because if we were to follow the early church and the apostolic canons to the T, especially with the succession, you would almost say, let's go to the metropolis of Chicago. So we have 58 parishes. You would need, what's 58 divided by 4? 12? 13?
Close.
12.
13 bishops to oversee roughly max 4 parishes. To have the intimacy of serving the people. So they can build a oneness and go from there. Now, the problem is you also have parishes that are the 58. Let's go to like central Illinois, where they have 50 families, 70 families, 100 families, and unfortunately, they can't even sustain taking care of a clergyman, right? How then can they then sustain to also then take care of a bishop? Yes, I understand, the bishops have their things, but there are bishops, and I think for myself, I've seen it firsthand. The bishop, when I met him, he was in Colombia. His name's Bishop Timotheos. And I don't know if many of you saw on social media, and we'll post some stuff on our website as well, too, in our email. We donated 5 large boxes of old altar boy robes, all liturgical items, and icons that we might have had that have gathered to Colombia and Venezuela so they can be used for missionary work down there. Because they are exploding with churches and congregations. And the bishop is a very simple bishop who literally brings the stuff and takes it to the places so they could perform the services and have the sacraments. They have them in little houses. They have them in little makeshift, what are those called outside? Not tents. Yeah, like a pavilion. They make like a makeshift pavilion, and they'll put 4 icons. They'll have a table, and they'll try to participate in the Eucharist, right? Simplistic, early Christianity in 2025. But it's pure, it's raw, and it connects with the people. That's why we hear in Central America, South America, and Africa, Orthodoxy growing, because it's in its purest form. Because even though there is hierarchy, right, and there's hierarchical rule and guidance and governance, they're also with the people. But it's hard because he's not going to minister to 2 countries, Colombia and Venezuela, okay? Where now it's growing. So then they're like, now we need another bishop. And I think one of the biggest struggles that the temptation comes in of the whole episcopacy that we were reading, and that's why I think Ignatius rises above most of it, is because he continues to be in that purest form and to put in his mind and his heart that he's always a representation of Christ, as I'm supposed to be when I'm at the church, when you are also supposed to be in any capacity as well too, is that they're not allowing pride and glory to take over and control them. Because unfortunately, it's modern day movie stars. When you put them on a pedestal, remember, we make movie stars on the pedestals, yet we also are the ones who want to pull them off the pedestals. So you bring them up to tear them down. Same thing with bishops, right? When Nathaniel came in 2018, everyone was excited. He was young. Oh, this is going to be wonderful and this and that. He's now been here 7-8 years. Okay, honeymoon's over. Time to get to work, right? We got things to do. You see more people pressing at him, right? They're not as, oh, this is so sweet and stuff like that. Same with other bishops, and then look at Bartholomew now. We have Bartholomew, who's the patriarch, right? The ecumenical patriarch, but he's of age. And the one thing from his recent trip that he just had in the United States that everyone was telling me was they were all mesmerized by his energy. Don't quote me, I think he's 89 years old, okay? But he was able to go to multiple meetings, multiple services, all to be done within a 10-day period. And, they're dragging him. Even if you have security and you have all this livelihood, whatever, to do the many stuff that he had to do is very daunting. But he is that representative. He is the direct successor all the way from St. Andrew himself to then make St. Stichas to be the first bishop of Byzantium, right? And then to now have, Bartholomew to be that successor after so many thousands of years. Yet he comes to be present. It's profound. That's when we have the ecumenical visits, stuff like that. It is of notoriety. But I, as a clergyman, can tell you one thing for sure. When I am, and I've had the opportunity numerous times to be with bishops one-on-one. It's key. Do you notice that term, one-on-one? They are usually the most human and simple form. I used to have breakfast with Ignatios of blessed memory at Burton Place. He'd have cereal and he'd read the newspaper. I'd be eating and he would talk to me. He was talking like a father to a son, a papu to a grandson. But it was very level. You know, we're not looking at him like an awness. Well, he's here, right? Roll out the red carpet, you know, get the nice silverware, get the china, fill out the start running around. You know what I mean? No, they're people. Nathaniel, amount of times that I've had one-on-ones and just down to earth and talk. I don't know if I ever brought up to any of this body or when we talk with Bible studies. When for all the seminarians, we go on a senior trip and then we visit the Patriarchate. Well, I went in 2013, obviously the same year I got married, and then I was here at St. Ignatios as the lay assistant. I was the only one, but I think you guys could tell by my attitude and my persona, I was the one who actually started the conversation with us all holiness. So they're all like at a big table like this in a big like dining room.
They're afraid to talk.
I'm just sitting. So I was like, well, someone's got to break in. So I'm like, Panayota, and he's like, it just like deep. And he starts talking. And I don't know what I asked him, something simple about the Patriarchate or regarding with America. And he really enjoyed to then have the conversation. And everyone's like, oh my God, you did that? I said, yeah, what's he going to do? Yell at you?
Yeah.
Smack you? I don't know. I mean, you got to start somewhere in that setting. Now, if this was remember, like they have patriarchal audiences, like you'll kind of see like how they do at the Vatican and even in Jerusalem, where there is a patriarchal audience area, and that's different. It has its formality, but we knew we were going to have dinner. He was there. He's literally sitting at the head, right? And we're staring at him, and no one's making a noise. They're all afraid to. Now, mind you, don't forget the Patriarchate also has an attitude of like a monastery. And the reason why I say that is because they call themselves like a brotherhood. So if you ever, has anyone been to a monastery a little extensively? When I say extensively, longer than just like visit for a day. Like if you could stay for overnight or whatever. I'll give you an example. Mount Athos. Okay, you might have, but or even a women's monastery or whatever. When you go to the trapeza to eat, there's no conversations.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My husband told me.
You're there to eat. They'll have a monk reading from scripture or the church fathers, and you're just focused on eating. You're not to say like, hey, how's your day today? Hey, how'd you do in your brain last night? What do you think of the podcast?
Who made this today?
I was about Athos with our class as well too, and they didn't. Oh, and they ring the bell, so they ring it like 3 different times. When to pray? Oh no, like first bell is for standing for prayer. Second bell is for the next meal, right? You start off like a salad, and you go to your main meal, but it's all right there, but you're supposed to wait. I saw the bread. I'm having a good time. And then the third one is to finish up. So that's only the time that you get. Right? It might be, 15, 20 minutes allocated. But then the whole time you're there. And so I'm sitting there. I remember me, I am a bit active. I trouble people. And so I was with my friends and I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? I'm like, can I have some of your feta? Shut up, we're gonna get in trouble. But anyways, that formality, that presence isn't what they're accustomed to. But going back to what we said about the episcopacy, when you get to meet them one-on-one, I've had that with numerous people. They used to talk about Iacovos in North and South America, other bishops as well, too, and if you got to meet them. And that's why you're still seeing them now receive canonization, because their holiness. Now it's not episcopacy, but clergy. I don't know if you've also taken note, but Father Roman Braga, a blessed memory, who is buried at the monastery of the Holy Door Mission Romanian convent in Rise Junction, Michigan. It's right by what's that? Not Grand Rapids, Lansing, Michigan. They're talking about for him for canonization. Father Roman's story is a very powerful one because he was in the concentration camps. He then was then sent to the Gulag in Soviet Russia, and it was on the border of Russia and Romania during the communist regimes. And especially being a clergyman, all they did, they just continued berate, beat him up. It was rough, and then he was freed, and then he came to the United States, and the whole time he was being a clergyman there, but he was also educated. He was like a professor. He was very wise, but didn't have books, so everything we were doing was a conversation, whatever it was. I got to meet him when I was a child, because we had visited the monastery, and he was the abbot over at the monastery here in Michigan. And I was just blown away because he was only Romanian and solid Greek and broken English. Wow. And so I'm a kid, so I really couldn't communicate any through those 3. I'm just talking to him in some English, but then a few things in Greek. But I saw I think one of the one things that I think strikes us, and then we're going to read more about this about Ignatius, because then that relates us to Christ, right? It's, everything goes back to how do we go back to Christ, is the realness, the pureness, and the oneness about the individual. When they're down to earth with you to talk, and it's funny, I think when people, like I'll have conversations with people, and it might be an animated conversation or an emotional one, and blurting out on accident because of the language we speak, it'll be a swear, and they catch themselves, because like I just said to a priest, I said, that's fine, just keep talking. Just keep talking. Now, you don't want to say like that about this, but if it comes out, it comes out. But it shows how the people are and that they're also being real. I think sometimes, some people are orchestrated or scripted and how they're going to speak and how they're going to say. And I think at the end of the day, we need to be genuine. Because why? All of the ministry of Christ, whoever he spoke to, was all genuine. He didn't tell them to speak one way or the other. When I always highlight the best example is the Samaritan woman at the well, at Jacob's well. That story is probably the most real story of conversation that Christ had with a person that was completely taboo on every ground. A woman with been married or multiple husbands, at Jacob's well, it's supposed to be a servant. She's supposed to get you water and there's supposed to be any talking, just do what you got to do. And it broke every ground, but it was real. It was one, and it was openness that illumined her mind. But then she then went into the village to then become that first apostle, because then she told everyone, let's go and see him. Right. And so when you think about that, that's why then Ignatius, that's why all the apostles, that's why Paul and his great epiphany and his awakening, right, to then become from the great persecutor to be the great illuminator into the world and everything else. We recognize that for ourselves, what really will allow us to succeed is when we can be down to earth. And I think what I appreciate with all of you and being stewards and obviously parishioners of our community working together is that you allow me to be down to earth in my insecurities and my failures. When you look at clergy and bishops, we have them to such a high regard that they're supposed to be the preeminent of everything, right? They should know should know theology. They should know everything. They should know how to be able to speak Greek. They should also know how to chant. They should also know how to read this, how the stuff and like that. And, and it should be done perfectly, right? There shouldn't be gaps, missteps, grammatical errors, whatever it might be. You said kalovradi instead of kalinita, whatever it might be. That is a reality, but unfortunately, we're all human. And I recognize it in myself. One thing I tell my brother clergy for anything they do, I said, recognize it in yourselves too. Don't feel that you have to be this perfection, because it'll only set you up for failure. And then I think we have this aura about the past, about our older clergy and older hierarchs, that we think of nostalgia. Look at your relationships from Father T to Father Byron to Kutulas to Kaludi to Chiganis to any of these, big clergymen that we see as heroes. And I tell them they're heroes in their time. Why were they heroes in their time? They were imperfect.
Oh yeah.
But they were heroes because they were walking with all of you in the earliest stages of the establishment of our churches, that then now 2, 3, 4 generations later go back and say, wow, that was impressive. And I say, okay, but that also means that even the clergy afterwards also are those bridges as well too, as I am a clergy to them for the next clergymen who are going to be bridges in the future. I think that's how the apostles, I think the early church fathers felt as well themselves. There's no gain, there's no glory. I serve these many people. It's the innocence, it's the purity, just to focus on the people and those who are in front of you. It might be someone who's struggling or celebrating or death or marriage or baptism, whatever the case would be. But you're with the people and you're of the people, because that's what Christ is, will be, and has, and then that's what they then believe and participate in the way. That's why the title episcopo, bishop, is so different in our comprehension modern day to obviously the times of Ignatius. So let's continue. One who has Christ as his bishop. Effie, when does she read that? End of page. Oh, are you? All right, don't worry about it. You're awesome though. God bless you. Don't worry about it. The next Effie.
The next
Let's go.
okay. One who has Christ as his bishop. The overarching image of the bishop found in Ignatius's letters is spoken perhaps most poetically and clearly in the salutation with which he begins his letter to his friend Polycarp. In that letter, he salutes Polycarp, bishop of the Church of Smyrnins, or rather one who has God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ as his bishop. To Polycarp, salutation. Literally, he is overseen by God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. For Ignatius, the bishop, while a towering figure in the church, is nonetheless a servant, one who has God as his bishop. Christ is the head not only of the Church Catholic, for God is the bishop of all, but he is also the bishop of the bishop in particular. The bishop therefore lifts all men up because he himself is lifted up by the Lord.
Very nice. Continue.
The bishop is indeed at the center of his church. However, he is not there as a tyrannical and absolute ruler, but as one who is truly the servant of all. If Ignatius is so strenuous in his insistence that the bishop must be obeyed, it is not because he preaches order for its own sake, but rather he preaches the grace that God has given to the bishop. Believers are to follow their bishop and give him obedience, but it is in the same vein as the Apostle Paul urges the Christians of Corinth. Imitate me just as I also imitate Christ.
Pause. Why was it easier then to imitate the bishops compared to it now? Do we really think all bishops are tainted or self-righteous?
No,
What do you think?
no. But they have an aura about them that
You just think
demands the respect.
Right.
Sometimes that respect might be given in fear,
Mm.
but it's given.
And I've seen even like in Cyprus, I've seen bishops there too, and they're usually it's the ones. I remember Cyprus, other places, so many. In Tripoli, Mandinia, Alexandros, Blessed Mary, who just passed away a couple years ago. He had his own farm. He rode his own tractor and collected his own vegetables. Do you notice to see a bishop do that? Now, he didn't have his pendant, but he had his rasa and he folded them up and went to work. He had a hat. How does that make you feel? Because I think our struggles modern day, which is amplified by the world, social media and everything else, because you see that we are in a world now in our technological postmodern world that it's sad, but our society, especially with algorithms stuff like that, is when there's one bad apple, the bunch is whole bad. So if there's one bad bishop, we have a connotation about all of them being bad or aura, right? So look at all the popes. For the last two of them, from Francis into Leo, after it was Benedict, right?
Mm-hmm.
After Benedict, who was still conservative but very,
But he stepped down.
yeah, you know what I mean. And that's very humbling.
Right.
Okay, but he, they're all waiting for like that hope of the people, and that's I find that a little rough because if we say that, then we're insinuating that the other ones weren't.
But
Go ahead.
I was in the military, and when I was in the military, it taught me about sovereignty. Okay, and one of the things that I saw, there's a difference between the station, position, and the person. Okay, and one of the things that I think that I'm getting from what he's reading is that it's more of an obedience to the position than it is to the person.
In obedience, can there be conversation that's not disrespectful?
It's hard. It's very difficult
Good.
because, like, I'm holding back trying to say something I want to say.
Right.
Okay. There are behaviors that modern day bishops engage in that I find highly questionable. So do I still see them in the same light that Ignatius instructs me to see them?
Mm.
Well, I can't say that I see the person that way, but I have to see the position that way.
And it's hard because look, and valid points. I think look at modern day. We know more about most people than at any time in history. You know what I mean? You had auras of people. Look now. Look what we've done in the world, right? We've taken out statues of Christopher Columbus, all these people, because I always quote quotes. We know more now than they did. Now I tell people, yeah, but how is that reflected? Is that saying that with with humility. They were stupid before, blind, naive. Was it circumstantial? Just what it was. And so when they did that, and to think of what was accomplished, yes, and then ethnicities, cultures, religions, and people would put on people as type of idols or martyrs or heroes. But because now that we think we're smart, and then I said, okay, you're going to take it down. What are you doing? You're going to replace it? Replace it with what? And that's the problem. I mean, I've seen it where, we've seen it throughout the country where they'll take down someone else and they'll put in what? Someone that they fought against, that they were actually the justified person. Unfortunately, now we're going into opinions. You believe that, she believes this. Okay. Look at the example of like the Confederate ones. Personally, for me, I never had an issue because I knew it was historical. That person existed. Robert E. Lee, whatever the case may be. But I think the failure is that we think that they were right. Just because there is a statue or whatever doesn't mean that I think they're right. Or we go down to Chicago and you go to see a George Washington statue, or the other one. Who was the not Crazy Horse? There was an Indian one that's right by
thing.
Yeah, right. Okay, but then that's a great example too. Look at the sports teams. You had the Cleveland Indians literally take off the name Indians, right? Simply because that was into the situation, and then they changed it to the Guardians. Now, are they saying because it was mockery or whatever? But I said for 50 plus years they were known as the Indians, but now they changed it, the Redskins. So I get it, I know, but it was a term. I'm not defending the term, but it was a reality. Am I saying that's correct? No, but then I asked the question. At the end of the day, if you've heard my attitude, almost anything I do in life always is, what is the purpose? What is the end goal? Now they changed it to the Washington Commanders. Okay, fine. But then look at the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks have fought that attitude very, very strongly. They have fought that attitude very strongly not to change their name because that's what they were called. That's who they were. It was very respectful. Same when they Florida State, the Seminoles, they were people. They were respecting. It's not mockery. I know they would get, but then look like at the Illini. They changed. But they can't use Chief Illinois.
Yeah,
right.
They still call
They still qualify the Illini.
They don't use the name,
It's all timing.
but there's a
Who's the other one? South Dakota, the Fighting Sioux. That's who they were. Sioux City were the Indian. I mean, like, we see we're getting
obliterate the actual notion of any Indians, and then they'll never even remember Indians.
Right.
It's the stupidest thing.
Well, then what's that? Okay, and then I'll look at it goes back to these attitudes, and goes back to what we said about the bishops. Now, all you understand about Indians, mocking wise, is casinos and reservations. Has it actually been to a reservation? I have. I saw it in Arizona. Oh my. It literally is terrible. To know you can literally go across the street, and it's a third world country. And I forget, like, we were driving and you see lights of the world across the street, and here a dim light, like it literally looked run down. Look, forgive my language, looked like a ghetto. And I was like, wow. And then when you would hear why they have the highest alcoholism, suicide rates, uneducation, I'm like, wow. It boggles my mind. But then it shows to now what we've diminished. I'm not defending that the sports teams were the saviors of the attitude of the Indians, but where are we gone to? So to highlight these situations, and going back, we said it's a very hard point, especially with the episcopacy, because unfortunately we know so much. And I was taught from a young age, my wife, presbitera, unfortunately had to deal from birth, but from a younger age, that the priesthood is, you are in a fishbowl. Every action we do is observed by everyone. And now with social media, and that's why I personally behind the scenes tell a lot of my friends, clergy and other people, I said, the easiest thing you could possibly do is do not engage on social media, nor put out your day-to-day life. If you see me on my social media, I will share what we do at the church. I will post a sarcastic thing about the sports, the Bears, my disgruntlement, or whatever, or something nice about my wife's anniversary. That's it. I will not put, today I did this, or I do this, or I got this, or I got whatever. It's shocking to me. There's some who post a lot, like today. But like, they'll post it, but they'll post, but the problem is, you don't know how the other person who sees it interprets it, and then B, what they're going to do with that. Because sadly, especially in our culture, ethnicity as Greeks, all we are these watchtowers to tell people, Idastiakane, Vlapistikani, see what they're doing, how they did, and this and that. We are that proverbial thing. And the funniest point is I see that day to day with my mom. My mom being a Greek woman, She's 72 years old, but she's retired. So now all she does really is all of her information comes from online and social media. And so yeah, gossip. But she was a beautician. I'll never forget this to my day. And now she's watching. I love you, Mom. But it was younger. It might have been 15, and it was like a type of whatever gossip or something or whatever. And I said, "Why do you talk like that?" And she's like, "Talk like what?" I'm like, saying about whatever's going on for someone. She's like, "We're not. We're just talking. It's just conversation." But you're including someone. Because if you really think about it, if you were to have a conversation with someone that didn't, even just now, if we didn't talk about anyone else, what we have talked about? I mean, other than giving some details, I'm like, what are you going to do? One-on-one. Okay, you say how your life is. How's your family? Great, bravo. Awkward pause. Now what? How do you have the flair? The rest is all. Then you go like, well, where's Maria? Where's Vasily? Where they at? And then the cycle goes on the circle and stuff like that. So, but then I also see that attitude. But then I would also have some other mentors who, even clergymen, which was pretty wise. They would get questions and he knew the answer, but they would all say, I don't know. Maybe I heard something. You never gave a definitive answer. Yes, no. You always gave a round answer because, unfortunately, as we are, any situation could become compromised. Because then they'll say, well, did you hear what he said that said this? Or did you know about this, that this person said whatever? But unfortunately, it triggers those ways that really for the episcopacy, it's very hard. I mean, look, we go back to Elpidio Foros. Elpidio Foros is that lightning rod. He's our archbishop. But he is the visible one, right? He's out there. But the problem is he's out there that could either be a misstep or a step forward. You've got the issues where goes back to when I had people, I had people message me. That's what struck me. Now, you're talking about from New York, what he did affected people here in Palatine, Illinois. Okay. But it would be random. It'd be random. Example, during the COVID, he walked with BLM. Okay. And my struggle with anything that a lot of people do, I talk with people is, do you or I just go do something? Or knowing that we have hierarchs, we have clergy, whatever, they also have advisors. They also have people they talk to. And then I'm saying, are they misguiding, right? Because it might not just be my thing. We might think we're doing something good. And that's where it gets stepped. And okay, so that, but then you'll see he'll do something very positive. We're like, oh, okay. And the whole time, it's like we're watching cinema. You're waiting for what's next, right? Is he going to keep a good streak? Oh, look, he went back down. He went to a Lutheran church. How dare he, right? Oh, back down.
Like it says on page 88, he's supposed to, the bishop's authenticity is also expressed by preaching the word of God correctly and warding off heresy. So if your bishop is not doing that, then what do you do?
If your bishop's not warding, now here's the problem. Look at this past year. This past year, the world celebrated 1700th anniversary of Nicaea.
Right.
Technically,
There's only supposed to be one bishop.
well, yeah. Well, not only that, but technically, you are not supposed to. Why would I converse with the other denominations when they're the ones who split off, even though they still recognize Nicaea, the First Ecumenical Council? Because we're not in communion.
But do they recognize the first? They don't really recognize the First Ecumenical Councils because they wouldn't have put the Floki in. And so, like the Catholics,
it goes into the Protestants and everything else. I mean, you name it. So when we have those conversations, I think most of them were with the Catholics.
Yeah.
I didn't see with the Protestants because, like you said, Protestants and how they formed and everything else. But with all the Catholics, but then what was the goal? Was it dialogue? Was it them to say the same thing? But then we also now. So what happens when we get to the Second Ecumenical Council? Are we then going to get into discussion about filioque? Right. You know what I mean? Like it goes back to what you said. Why do we do what we do, and how is it done? Because is that representing the bishop and his episcopacy and being that? And what I hear, I've heard Nathaniel and I've heard other metropolitans and bishops too. They try to also go back to the level of Christ-like, the attitude of being merciful. But the problem is merciful is contextual and it's not conditional, but it's in situations.
We also, though, we all compete with the zeitgeist, your German word.
Mm-hmm.
We're at spiritual warfare with powers of the air that are controlling much of what we see today.
Correct.
I mean, our day-to-day life is heavily influenced by negative forces.
Very true, and negative imagery and negative consequences. And last one too, so we can move on for our reading as well too. I just read something yesterday and it blew me away. But it only happened because they saw it on social media. Ready for this one? I'm waiting for the context. A bishop was at a service in Greece, and in the imagery that someone took in the altar when they lift up for the consecration of the gifts, there was two amnos on a Sunday during October.
What's that word?
Amno is the lamb.
Okay.
Lamb. Okay. You only cut an extra lamb if you're going to have a pre-sanctified liturgy. That can only be done during Great Lent. So the question now comes in: A, why was this done? B, why did the bishop allow it? And then C, what are the consequences of it? Because that's actually sacrilegious. It's not dogmatically correct. Some people think that he did it as an extra piece, that maybe they had an enormously large congregation that they, I don't know, right? But it was astounding because it really brought up a caution sign saying, hold on, what's going on here?
Red flag.
Not only the red flag in multiple facets. One, okay, if that's him, you guys, you don't get it. You said it would have been. There are people, you're gonna laugh. There are people, not ordained, people who will get clerical vestments, wear them, and do services at their homes or whatever, acting like priests and bishops. There's one, and like I remember he has a Facebook. He's like in Pennsylvania. He's like a bishop of something, but he's actually not under anything. Full garb. When you would see him outside, you'd be like, "You're a bishop. Who are you under? What are you?"
Yeah.
You would have no idea. And then they'll make up something, and that's how. Go back to like any of these denominations. Now that's with Orthodoxy. They have those denominations. You hear that with Protestants. You hear the Catholicism, evangelicals, any of those situations. And look at the manipulation that it does to the people.
Yeah.
All this does is confuse, contradict, make us struggle, and then we now have the attitudes that we have about anything. When we said before in the very beginning why one bad apple makes the whole bunch bad, now we have an attitude, instead of us being obedient, we are prejudging until the person has walked the walk, and then from there to be a true episcopal, to be a real bishop. But unfortunately, I can tell you, at least in my opinion, I don't know how many people feel genuinely when a new bishop's made or whatever, but there's always reservations. To say someone has been thoroughly washed and through and everything else, oh great, but I think there's always reservations, which okay, I don't think we should all just jump in and say we're saved, but to say that we're going to be obedient to the episcopacy as they're telling us to be, right, to the respect of the office, to the title, and not knowing the back, it's hard because, as you said, now with social media, technically, even with me, so I have social media from the very beginning. I had someone, I'm just going to laugh with this, because I have two accounts. The reason why I have two accounts is because my first Facebook one, which is on my desktop of the church, was my original one. It got locked out, so I couldn't get in, and it is a very important tool for me because actually people communicate with me, whatever. And I finally get it back. But on there, it has images of me from college because that's when it started. So if you see Father Chris in college, I didn't have a beard. I was probably out with some friends. We were probably having a drink. We were having a good time. And what do people do? I never get someone comment on one of them. They said, "Oh, this is a priest." I said, "Yes, that was a priest 25 years ago."
Just like
Yeah.
at the baseball game, then when they had
Yeah, but remember, we're, you know what we are? We're Monday morning quarterbacks. I'm going to judge everyone, see who they are, and say, how dare you? Because that's the problem. With that, so now you go back to what we said about the patent thing. Now the problem is, now everyone's become theologians. How dare you? And they're like, right? And they're not priests. They're not theologians. But we all chomp, right? If we're all sitting here right now and this was a conversation, do we really think all the people would say, how dare you and stuff like that? I don't think so. So that's why it's always mindful when we talk about the episcopal and understanding how we go through. I'm going to go to 88. Go ahead, you're okay. Effie, why don't you read the rest of 88 where it says the bishop's authenticity?
The bishop's authenticity is also expressed by preaching the word of God correctly, warding off heresy, something mentioned repeatedly by Ignatius, and having God's mindset. There is an objective character to the faith and the mindset that the bishop must have in order to be functioning correctly. He must speak truly of Jesus Christ, and no one should listen to anyone who does not. Who does not.
Does not. Good.
Doctrine and morality are specific and set, not a matter of private opinion. Val writes, effective Episcopal authority is a three-legged stool, combining office, charism, charism, and what is elsewhere called the standard of truth, or the standard of our tradition. One could say exactly the same thing of the presbyterate for parish priests, whose authority derives from the bishop, need to function in all the same ways.
Very true. And I think we as clergy deal with that on a regular basis. That goes back to what I said, what people expect of their clergy. They have to do all these things, they have to wear multiple hats, and that's to define them if they are there to be defined as an appropriate or solid priest. But unfortunately, even in that has its own connotations, because it can also be misleading, because you might have someone who speaks Greek or chants very well, but might not know how to even write a letter in their office, right? Or might not have administrative qualities. But at the core of everything, I think goes back to the third one, what it says regarding the standard of truth and the standard of our tradition. In no way can we change anything. That's very powerful. Like, we're not here to change any dogmas, any teachings, any things like that. But I can, as a clergyman, as I work with everyone, serve and help them one-on-one as is needed through what we are taught dogmatically. So it doesn't mean like, oh, that's okay, you're a sinner, that's fine, just keep doing what you're doing. But you give them a guidance and a support in their individualistic issue or situation. And again, I think the most common situation like that is most likely is with homosexuality and adultery, or people in those situations, because we're all sinners. But we could still support and be there for one another. But the struggle is that we think that just because of what it is and how it is, that we can't be saved, or then the church is against us, or whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, I think that's a misinterpretation, because then we're all still humans. We still suffer. We all still struggle. And I think that's why it's important that we understand, how do you still hold it, yet to minister to an ever-evolving world that's only getting more intense and more complex. I mean, you see what people using AI, ChatGPT, all these different things. And then now we're all thinking we're becoming theologians, when in reality, it's just them taking stuff off of the internet to give you whatever answer it is that you wrote in that moment and in that situation. So I think it's very important that we comprehend this stuff, especially about the episcopacy, and go from there. We got a few more minutes.
Does the church, I don't think the church does a good enough job to explain to the common parishioners of the hierarchy. So they don't know, for instance, how the bishops are selected, how, they don't, there's not a common thing. If you ask the average Joe here.
Excellent point. Now, modern day, since the inception of social media, and I mean, look at social media. I can go now on the Ecumenical Patriarchate, and I can see how they vote for the bishops. It's really cool. They go to the Fanar, they're in the Church of St. George, and they have this kind of cauldron, and they all have their votes. Now, you got to understand backstory. They have meetings, they have discussions, then they submit the votes. That's why the votes are almost always either unanimous, whatever, because they already decided, and then they put it into there. But you can actually see it happen. And then they offer what is called the megalo minima, que to micro minima, which means the great announcement and the short announcement. And in the short announcement, it's the declaration of the bishop, or the person who's going to be elevated to the episcopacy, or to the archiepiscopacy, or the patriarch. And then from there, then they go to the great minima, the great proclamation, the great announcement. And then that person, who's the bishop-elect, then stands in front of the altar, and says his things as well too, and goes, you can actually see that now. Centuries, we never saw that, because we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have cameras. So it's done very secretly. See, like what you see, like this, I'm sorry for interrupting, for like the papacy, right? You don't see what goes on inside. But this year, if you notice for Leo, you'd get like commentary from Bishop Dolan, all these guys, and telling you, and like, that was pretty cool. You didn't know how it was going, the way it was going down, nor did they even realize that they were going to actually vote an American to be a pope, right? So when you think about it, it's pretty wild to see how it's gone to the way it's done. And there is, because the other we also don't tell is like, what are the qualifications, age, experience, history, all that stuff. You have to look for that. But dogmatically and in the canons, it does show all of those information so that we can understand how they get to the point. But there is, unfortunately, I think the one essence that we can't deny, there is a sense of politics. I don't care what anyone thinks. Whatever you want to die, there is. Whatever it is, there is. They're going to talk. There's komata. There are groups who will say, let's get this, let's get that, let's work together. You pray that they think about it spiritually and for the betterment of the church, big then small church. But there's people who are appointed, or there'll be bishops who need an assistant bishop, and they will push. Let's put him in. I could use him as an auxiliary bishop and stuff like that. But unfortunately, that's a reality. And I do think, and if comparing to Ignatius and hearing these things, that might be where the taint comes in. Is that because politics are tied in? But then it's because everything we do is a part of the world, and it's influenced by the world, connected with the world, and attacked and offered for the world. That to really define, to go above and beyond it, the only real purity of that would probably have to be Mount Athos, because Mount Athos obviously doesn't have, they have their own governance, right? Their own, as the peninsula or whatever. That even when they assign their own abbots, it's not very political. It's whoever's next up, or whoever's been. If the one's going to retire, he's going to pass it down, and then it goes from there. But unfortunately, it's almost impossible. Even how they assign clergy. When I was assigned here, because A, I had put in my 4 years at St. Demetrius, Chicago. B, they needed another priest. Obviously, they wanted a younger priest. It was also circumstantial. B, I'm a younger priest, so I'm getting paid less than more inexperienced priest. Don't make that face. Truth is truth. B, the church was struggling with finances. So to say they're going to put a priest of 25 years to a priest of 5 years could have been detrimental. You don't know that. But you see, all these things come into play on how and when they apply or put people to place. They don't just say, okay, Maria, you go here, Vasily, you go here, this and that, and everything's all hunky-dory. There has to be method, there has to be process into the need of the community. Or worse, what if you put a priest who came from Greece and doesn't speak English to a church that only does English? Then that would crumble. Or then you have a priest who only knows English who goes thrown into St. Demetrius in Astoria, and he doesn't know any English. I mean, doesn't know any Greek. And then he's going to crumble because they're staring at him. They're like, what's this, what's this character doing up there, right? It's honest. It's just reality. But these have to be thought out. They have to be prayerfully mindful about it and attentful, so it can support the need of the parishes. But there is an attitude, going back to the episcopacy now, and we'll kind of just wrap up there for today, because I know Father Patrick wants to go in his next meeting, concluding 3 and 4. But there is a mindfulness that they are trying to be more attentive to the parishes. I mean, His Eminence, look at Metropolitan Nathaniel. All of the month of August, he was in Minnesota. So for 4.5 weeks, he was with the 5 parishes that are in Minnesota, and he was with each parish for about a week. Got to know them, got to know the people. He interacted with them, not just liturgically, personally. They got together, and not formal dinners, not let's go to a steakhouse. It might have been at someone's house. It might have been at the church. It might have been whatever. But they got to know their bishop. Who would have thought? But that's a stretch, because he could do that now. Can he continuously do that? And the reality is, and they have talked about it, but it's not realistic. For the churches to grow, you need multiple bishops. You need more bishops to be able to serve the need of the people. But then the problem is they have to be obedient to their hierarchs. They have hierarchs too. So it means they have to be obedient to the metropolitans, to the archbishops, paying for them, everything else. It's not easy. It's a difficult thing. But that's why I think the Catholic Church, they have so many bishops. Even look at their diocese. You have the Diocese of Peoria, the Diocese of Joliet. Think about how many churches they probably have in those areas, but that's where you have a bishop. And that's what he oversees. And then he reports to who he has to report to, cardinal, archbishop, whatever the case may be. And they go from there. But there is a success story in the episcopacy, but it's what's impossible to man is what's possible with God. I always state that first. But how can you make this impossibility of them to be pure and genuine, to be like a true shepherd? Because it's almost impossible. We have them in an aura. We have them on a pedestal. We deck them out with all of these things. I do give Nathaniel a lot of credit. When he goes to some small parishes, he doesn't bring out the whole thing. Doesn't wear the mitre, the mitra, right? He'll wear the pano kalima for the black. He won't bring the vikera trikera. That's the candles, the 2 and the 3. He just wants to do a simple liturgy. And I've seen, and I think that's very humbling. If you ever get a chance to see when a bishop does a liturgy as a priest, he wears all the priest vestments, my phelonion, right, which is my cape, and all he puts on to symbolize his episcopacy is the omophorion, which I said is that shawl that's wrapped around his neck. Simple. He's there. It's like you are of the people. Instead of exactly what we said, he's standing on a throne, right? He has this big staff.
Yeah.
Look at me, got the thing, looking at the people like a way. But it's true. But I did say one time, and we'll wrap up on that. I tease that. I said if anything were to happen, or if she wouldn't want to be with me anymore, I would be more than happy to become the Patriarch of Alexandria. Solely on the fact because he gets to wear two petrachilis to symbolize him being the Patriarch of Alexandria and the Judge of the Ecumeny. That's his title. I love it because he is the one who reconciled many of the Orthodox churches in I think the 7th or 800s, and they gave his see of Alexandria this great title. And so he wears two petrachilis, literally the one normal one and then the second one. And so it's like all this
Very
decked
hot,
out.
Alexander.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm like he's got to be all decked out or whatever.
Careful
But,
what you wish for.
but him too. Do you know how powerful it is to see your patriarch go to like Nigeria, to go to Ghana and all these countries, and he's sitting there dancing with the people. You know, they have their liturgies are very rhythmic. They're singing.
yeah.
Yes, they learn Byzantine, but you know how wild it is that they know Greek, and then they will know their dialect or whatever it might be, their language, and they will implement it to all the services and even the cultures of their their traditions of their cultures. You know, they'll dance or they'll sing, and you'll see him. He's doing it with the kids and everyone. It's you're with them. You're of the people, and so it does exist. There are bishops who do like that, and I think when people see that, there was another last bishop, I believe it was the last one. His name is Bishop John Abdullah. He is the Bishop of Worcester of the Antiochian Church. And you want to know why? Oh, he was like that too. Is Bishop Elia Katri? You remember Bishop Elia Katri, who was the Albanian bishop?
Yeah.
Used to go to St. Nicholas. Those two have always been considered very popular bishops. Can anyone guess why?
They're like the people.
I got to give you a hint because it'll be hard for you to think about. Bishops. How do bishops? What is one of the prerequisites to get ordained? It's before you're ordained as a priest, you have to choose
Yeah.
Be married or not?
celibacy or not.
Oh.
Bishop John and Bishop Elia Katri were widowed, married. The presbyteros passed away, and they had kids.
Yeah.
So they've seen life. They've dealt with life. They dealt with families. They dealt with situations. So when they became bishops, 55, 65, 70 years old, they've had a life experience that might be different than a celibate bishop who never had a family or to take care of this or to deal with this or stuff like that. That's very powerful because now when you even hear the Catholic Church talking about, celibate priests, imagine like the bishops too, because that's a hard thing. And I've heard that from bishops. They cannot relate. Whatever you want to do, even if they have pets or they're taking care of their mother, whatever, it's not the same. And that's just something food for thought and understand the episcopacy. So thank you guys for this today. Our next meeting is actually going to be sometime. I think it's in November because Father and I are gone in 2 weeks because we have our leadership training. So I think it'll be in the month of November that we're going to reconvene. So pray you have a beautiful day. God bless you and good seeing all of you. Take care. God bless you guys.
Thank you. You know, I have a funny story. Do you remember, Mom, at Paul's wedding? At that time, they were changing the phone numbers that you had to put a 1 and an 847.
Oh, yeah.
And Bishop Ignatios was sitting next to me, and he's going, and I said, "Oh, you did it wrong. You have to add that number." Oh, he says, "That's right. I think that's a great thing." I said, "I don't." Why? I said, "Well, think of all those children that are out there that are missing, and if they get a chance to call their families, they don't know that they got to put an 847." And he said, he stopped, then he looked at me, and he goes, "Oh my God, I never thought of that." But that was the first thing I thought.
Awesome. What a small world. God bless you guys. Alora, great seeing you. Thank you.
It was yesterday, huh?
Yesterday, yes.
Mine is today.
God bless you. How long have you guys been? 60 years?